show the real things we get, because nobody is perfect. Solidarity we expect. Come collect here. Respect, show the real things we get. Respect, because nobody is perfect. Respect, solidarity we expect. So much good vibes you can collect. Respect, show the real things we get. Respect, because nobody is perfect. Respect, solidarity we expect. So much good vibes you can collect. 'Cause respect.
Radio tonight. We have Darren online. Is Darren there? I think Darren is there. That's why we start a little bit later. He is not there. Okay. We want to talk about the spell of your story and the people's public trust. People's public trust is not the one people's public trust, but the idea that gets stolen from Darren Deojee. And we also have here BJ.
Evening all.
We have Lee.
Evening, Jabba.
And Bob is operating the show, and anytime welcome, he want to share something. I think we even get Darren here now. No. All right. Today is a very strange day, I have to say. BJ broke my studio. I could fix it. But I don't know if the moon from yesterday influenced very much what is really going on. And but I discovered Darren when he was talking on the Bilderberg meeting. He said he just walk around and suddenly grab the microphone to make a speech. And I contact him because I also saw a couple of videos afterwards how he talk about things. And one thing that he was talking about is the whole spelling, about spelling words in the law and in the society, and even that we spell our own story. I live in the French part here in Switzerland, and I think French people, I always say that to the French people too, not only in English, is they put very much importance on how you spell the words. So much that even if you come just from another city and you talk to them, it's like they just tell you that you have a strange accent or something, and that creates so much separation that the spell get very much importance too. Maybe Lee can help us a little bit about the people's public trust. Can you tell a little bit what it is? So if Darren arrived to come, so he can explain it further.
Yeah, well,
Hello.
Hey, have we got a Darren?
Oh, we got Darren.
Yeah, that's right.
Yay!
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Sorry, I had to travel to get a signal there. We've got mass problems where we live, so we've had to travel out of town to the next town to kind of get a signal.
No problem. Thanks for coming on the show. We just put another song between, and I tried to, or I explained just how I discovered you on the Bilderberg when you was not supposed to have a speech, and you grabbed the microphone. And that was the first video I saw from you, and then I saw some other. Just to tell you that we also have Lee on the show, and BJ.
Hello. Hey, guys.
And Bob is also is operating the show and also come in maybe. And I think...
Wow. I feel like I'm in a busy room.
Yeah, but we want to hear mostly what you have to say. about,
Oh my
like I told you this morning, about the spell of your story. And I put not our story or his story, I put your story. And that is because I want to first know also your story, how you unspell your story, or what you put out exactly with this spell. I think that is for me, and I want later we can talk about the People's Public Trust. A lot of people are interested in that project too, but let's start with the spell of our story, or his story, or your story.
Yeah, well, I always rather start with your story rather than my story, that's for sure. It's always a bit dull infilling the back of life, really, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, so you saw the short talk, was it at Bilderberg, or was it the longer one? Just the short one when I wasn't meant to be getting up, and we ended up doing OMS, is that one? Wow,
yeah, the short
that
one,
that was quite radical. That was unusual. I've never had to do that before. And it was really quite testing for me. So I'm interested in your experience of that being the first contact, basically. But I think there's been this common thing about spells and spelling recently now, because a lot of people are talking about it. But the understanding the art of the spell and how it actually works is just a lot more than a bit of wordplay or breaking words up. That's very, very much the beginning of it. And,
and
when I get into the arts,
you just spelled one of the word we try to change since a while. That is the understanding, and we put in place the overstanding.
yes, that's right. Thing is, I mean, in a normal context, there's nothing wrong with understanding. It's only in the legal context that it brings you a problem. And I think one of the challenges that we've got in the modern world is the specialization of language based on context or field. So what words mean in a particular field varies. So if we're talking about, legalese, then certain words like person and understanding mean different things. Whereas if we're talking in an everyday context, then they don't. And we need to be fluid rather than fixated on that, I think. So I've been in many sovereign groups over the years where there's this real fixation or fear of the word person or understanding. And these people got, there's just a bit of an overreaction to it. And it's like, no, one of the primary rules about spelling is that it's all about context. And the context is what gives you everything. So don't be afraid of words themselves. It's all about the context, and the application is the main thing. The art of the spell, like you were saying, that it's all about spelling your story. And for me, that's what the goal here is understanding what it is to be the storyteller of your own life. This is about authority. And what people start doing is they start by allegedly challenging authority, but it's not really challenging authority. It's discovering one's own authority. There is no authority on the land. It's about humans interacting with other humans. But we're taught a different thing from that, and we then have to go up. This is the journey everybody's on, is discovering what authority actually is. So we're born and brought up buying into a story of humanity. This is what sort of authority is about the author. So this is where the concept of the story comes from. So, at home, the storyteller or the authority was mum or dad. At school, it was the teacher. At work, it's the employer. And while in that place, the authority tells you how to behave, what are the rules to behave there, and what you should do while you're here. And, so all these little micro authorities we've encountered have often taken up our attention when we're forgetting about the big authority or the big story. And that is the story of humanity, of what it is to be a human being, why human beings are here, what they're for, what is it a good human being should, quote unquote, should, that guilt-laden word of should. What should we be doing with our time to be of worth to our species? I mean, these are the big questions of the big story, and the big one we're doing is trying to undo that. But at the minute, we don't have a commonly agreed replacement for that story, and this is something that we're discovering together, I think. But the only place we have to start with is our own lives. And so the big thing for me is people are so much about rebelling against some outside authority, when in actual fact it's no, don't rebel against an outside authority, find your internal authority, and then you won't find yourself in conflict. You'll find yourself with presence and gravitas and effectiveness in so many different situations, but only through understanding how we spell our own fallibility, we spell our own weakness, we even spell our own demise with our expectations and the words we say about ourselves.
Is that also
We spell our
about like
separativeness.
I say well, the protests it's a lot about the protests in this time also, since the Arab Spring and the Occupy movement and all that. What I discovered, or what I observed when Bush wanted to go to Iraq, there was a huge amount of people in the streets, and before that, well, they saw the 9/11, and then Bush said we have to attack the terrorists, and 2 years later he wanted to invade Iraq. Everybody was in the street, and I say, you're going to promote the war for him. That is what I saw. What happened? I never saw so much people in the street protesting. Most of them against the war instead of peace already. And the other side is also like what happened right now is all the protests. And what I'm saying is that if you protest against a system, you give them credit, and afterwards they will just put more police in place to prevent this kind of thing. What do you think about that?
Honestly, that is absolutely the nail on the head. This is about spelling duality into an ongoing existence. So people are talking about unity principles, or they're talking about unity idealism, but they're not aware that their everyday behaviour and thought process is dualistic and separative. And they're not aware of how they fall into that trap every moment. So, like you say, if you're protesting against a position that somebody else is taking, if you're even mulling it too much, feeding it with any energy, then you're giving it substance and value. You're still telling the same story. You're just telling a different perspective on the same story or the same thing. I mean, I do invite people sometimes to consider that every single event that you've ever heard of, every single thing, right the way back to childhood, when you were not present, so you weren't there. If you weren't there, then it is just a story. And what that means is it's actually a story of somebody else's life. And that is to ponder the reality of that, what it is to realize that we often tar our own life with stories of other people's. That is incredible, because that's like saying, the lady down the street got burgled, so I'm going to get a burglar alarm. Do you know what I mean by that? So then it's like saying that because something has happened to somebody else, I am now in fear of the same thing happening to me, because then what we're doing is we're jumping into the same pot as them without understanding the uniqueness of our own life. Say, well, actually, what you've just done is by buying that burglar alarm because the lady down the road got burgled, is you're starting to tell the same story. You're feeding the same story. So this is what's coming out through the media and the press is a story of humanity. Even the alternative media, it's deadly because it has people telling horror stories about the world from a really terrifying perspective. And while it makes them feel aware, there's a downside, there's the hidden downside, that they can often feel powerless and overwhelmed to do something about it, because how can they stop bombs from dropping on people in Iraq? How can you stop the gas coming out of the planes' bombs as they're flying over the sky when you don't even know who's doing it? So while there's the illusion of empowerment through awareness of something going on, there's a veiled powerlessness in there that just keeps people glued to their seats and to the media, because they're so starved of effective action. And so this is where protest becomes used as a tool, and without people realizing that they're just telling the same story. So what you've got it's like this concept of the great plan of the Illuminators or whatever, the Illuminati are doing this, or the ruling elite are doing this, and it's like nonsense. 12 people in a room cannot change the world. But that if they get you to tell their story, and then you're telling it to another people, and then 12 million of us are telling that story, that's a different tale altogether. That will change the world. But what we've done is we've used.
I saw also about the most peaceful people. They put some pictures out of about animal cruelty. and they get the worst killer. They say, "Oh, this one I could hang up, I couldn't beat him, I could stamp on him, and I don't know what."
Yeah, yeah,
And that is just amazing. The most peaceful guy who just claim peace for the whole world. And like I say, also like
yeah. You're right. It's such hypocrisy. Go on.
yeah, the peace, fighting for peace is like fucking for virginity.
Yeah, exactly. And people can be so wrapped up in their feelings and reaction to things that they're not aware of how much they are actually feeding it and recreating it in the now. It all depends on perspective. It's like, what role do you believe you have in the great tale of humanity? People really play down the worth and the value of their thought process and of the power of their interaction with other peoples, but yet we're all expressions of the epitome mammal, or the master mammal of this planet. And so many people play down the worth of their interactions, and it's all about the spelling aspect again, where they just absolutely have hobbled themselves without being aware of it in beliefs that their contribution isn't worth anything, or that what they do isn't worth stuff. And so then they get left with this pot of frustration or dense energy that just comes out, like you say, as the animal rights protester wanting to torture the person that injects mice with stuff or things like that. And it just becomes this horrendous hypocrisy where people aren't looking at the real issues, which are actually, well, what's going on in your life? Because that's the one that counts. What is going on in your relationships and your connections with the human beings that are around you? Are you able to even interact with them, or are you so caught up in the frustration of all your considerations of the world that all they get to see is the stony face and your frown and your introverted gaze, because you can't even see that they're walking past you because you're mulling over the problems of humanity so much, but believing that you're helping because you're stewing over these ideas without realizing that you're depriving humanity of your presence because you're so caught up in the mental realms. It's such a tricky position we find ourselves in terms of, well, what is the effective method of change? What is the route to transport humanity to a different life? And people seem to think it's about taking on the big issues. It's about taking on the big challenges. Go for the heads of corporations and things like that. And yet still they're not looking at the starved humanity that are surrounding them. And what they're starved of is other human contact. And I'm seeing changes in that now, and there is much more humanity on the streets than there used to be, I think, but they're still riddled with a very cold hypocrisy there of judgment and themism, where it's about them or about the sheeple and things like that. And people are creating separatist groups and separatist thinking all the time without realizing that, well, we're all bits of that sheeple, and sometimes we are all playing the role of sheeple at times. And there is no, the concept of awake is such a misused term, where people seem to think that, becoming aware that you've been lied to by your representatives, that's not awake, that's just starting to pay attention. They're not actually necessarily the same thing. And trying to decide how to act effectively, that's a much more awake action. And so you can have people who are doing nothing or seem to be doing nothing, but actually, if they're managing their attention and they're not feeding the problems of the world, they can be much more effective as an awake entity than people who are out ranting in the streets every week. It's a funny thing. There's a thing, a friend of mine and we have a bit of a joke about a thing that we call the rise of the false positive. And the rise of the false positive is all this sort of pious new ageism of either a spirituality or a protesting against globalism and capitalism that seemed to be some kind of pious moral higher ideal. But in actual fact, it's a false positive reading of good growth, because it's masking dealing with the real issues. So you've got the people who won't interact. So they'll be like, I'm not going to interfere because I'm adopting this pious position of non-intervention, and I will, I'm not going to get into situations that make me angry or upset me because that's not where I'm at spiritually, or whatever they want to say. But actually what they're doing is they're hiding from their own anger, they're hiding from their own lack of skill at confronting issues that really upset them, and it's a false positive reading of this pious meditator who's actually not dealing with the actual issues of their life that will bring them the power and the presence that they seek. Or similarly, you've got the people out there who think that they are doing a valid protest by screaming abuse and trying to attack or throw things at who they believe are the evil decision makers, when in actual fact they're engaging in exactly the same behaviour as the entirety of the American and British forces, which and all the forces engaged in such crazy wars where it's about attacking that which is unknown. You know, so if somebody lives in a way that you don't understand, or there's something about the way that they live that you don't really understand, then, you know, we're going to attack that. We're going to kill that. Let's wipe that out. Let's annihilate that. And that's actually what we try to do to aspects within ourselves that we don't understand. So, you know, when there's bits of us that react, either when we're emotionally reacting to things or mentally reacting, and we're then ashamed of our outburst or whatever, the common reaction in personal growth is to either, rather than deal with it, is to mask it and conceal it, pretend it doesn't exist, or pretend we were temporarily possessed and blame things like the alcohol or the situation or it was them or whatever, when in actual fact we're engaging in the same practice. It's a microcosmic and macrocosmic mirror where within, you know, I can be sitting there piously saying, I don't support the war in Iraq and blah, blah, blah. I signed the petitions and I went to the protest. But within oneself, if that person is seeking to subjugate and annihilate the vulnerable emotional parts of self that can't defend itself, then it's like, mate, you are the manifestation. You are it. You are the problem. You might as well be wearing Bush's jacket. You know, but that guy could be the one at the front of the G8 protest, on the front of the Independent, and everybody thinks he's Mr. Anonymous, especial. And in actual fact, it's completely upside down. So this is what we call this false positive reading, and we need to be so careful. You know, almost every spell, every word, every concept has been used at both positive and negative poles at the point now where almost everything is cliche, and the only thing we've got to rely on is our own experience and our own sense of substance and connection. And I think there's more people getting tuned into that, but there's a very, very long way to go, and an awful lot of problematic reactions out there because people are still blaming rather than owning where they're at within themselves. You know, humanity has still got a long way to go before it finds its personal power in that respect, you know.
Is but that is part of reverse psychology, and that we still have a source of that. Or how do you explain that kind of creation? What I observe is that, like, all this is an issue of let's say the first world or the Western world, because when you go to simple people around the world, they don't have this kind of issues, you know. It has to be a source. It have to be a. How do you explain this source?
This is a big question, and it's one that I only have radical answers for, I'm afraid. And it's about perspective, isn't it? Yeah, it's all right, because I mean, you know, you can take many different perspectives or scales, microcosmically and macrocosmically, when we're looking at stuff. You know, we could be looking at it at a cellular level, we could be looking at it at the human experience level, we could be looking at it at a so-called spiritual level or a cosmic level or whatever. And for some questions, there are only abstract answers, and for the problem that we're discussing here, the only writings or experience I've come across that I resonate with are in the works of Alice Bailey, and there's some really interesting. So she was a 1920s esotericist. She was a student of H.P. Blavatsky. I know a lot of people aren't that keen on that work, but it was transitional work at the time, and I still think some of Bailey's work is some of the most incredible writing I've come across. And in it, what they're talking about is the evolution of the species. But so many people are familiar with the concept that, you know, humanity seems to be evolving through the energy centers, or evolving through the chakras in some way, or evolving through the bodies. And that's kind of, you can generally look at that, where if you look across time, we began with our focus being survivalism and survival-based exploration. So we were looking at shelter and warmth and food and continuity in that respect, and it was all about the physical. And then something happened at some juncture. There's many tales about it and many traditions around the world, but what the trigger was is unknown. But there was some kind of emotional awakening within humanity that didn't seem to be there before, and that was the birth of kind of desire-based thinking. So where the pursuit was beyond the basic survivalism, and it became about pleasure, and it became about desire, and it came about that sort of not necessarily just sensual gratification, but certainly sensual exploration. So that is like literally the exploration of the senses. So once we developed a stability of survivalism, there was this awakening into basically moving from the first chakra to the second chakra. So moving from the first center consciousness to the second center consciousness. So this is when we're not long out of that era, to be honest. So this was. You could consider it to be along the times of the myths of Atlantis, when humanity was in a watery consciousness or a watery astral-based desire. And we've still got words that have connotations like that, like the word merchant. The word merchant has really strong Atlantean links, because the term mer we only use as a prefix for sort of ocean-based things, and the concept of the merman or the mermaid as being this half water creature, half human. And, the merchant could almost be considered to be the music of the sirens, alluring us to whatever certain doom. And here we are living in a world where, we're surrounded by the spells of the merchants, with the sign of entrance over their doorways, enticing us in, and it's entrance, and we're allured in there to part with our powers. But I'm digressing there. The point being that we awakened into a second emotional, the second body, and that was at its early stage about desire, at its later stage about the cultivation of morals, ethics, and somewhat. And this led us to the next awakening, which was that of the mind, or specifically the lower mind. And what's interesting is that the esoteric texts refer to it as concrete mind, because the lower mind believes its ideas are real. So it believes they're like concrete. So ideas like politics or existentialism or philosophy, the intelligent mind thinks that those are real things when they're not real. They're just momentary points of consideration as of abstract irrational being, and yet the lower mind seeks to make them rigid. Now, what's really challenging is that in the works of Bailey, she is suggesting that each of the races of man represent cellular explorations into developing expertise in those chakras or in those centers. So what she's suggesting is that the Africans and the Aborigine races and the black races were about the excellence of the first chakra, the excellence of the body, the excellence of survivalism, and of that sort of grounded-based connection with nature. No less divine and no less capable of accessing the divine, but it being achieved through physical excellence and physical alignment. The suggestion was that the Eastern races, or the yellow man as you would call them, or the Orientals, were about the excellence of the second chakra, or the emotions, and that the yellow man went to fully explore the fullness of the mastery of the emotional body or center. And then beyond that, there was then we had the arrival of the Aryan or the white race, which is what she's suggesting that their role was the mastery of the intellectual or concrete mind. And what we find in the world around us is that the manufacturings of the Western world are literally concrete edifices to represent the ideas that have been thought of. So we create the edifices for royalty and governance and hierarchy. We create the edifices of law and order, morality and medication. It's happening in the world where we're looking at the paving over of the rest of the world. So, you can go to Egypt now and get McDonald's delivered to your door. You can go to the Czech Republic and find Tesco. These ideas are being seeded to the rest of the world, where, like you said, these were much more simplistic cultures because they represented explorations of different aspects of interacting with our environment from a different anchor point within the human framework. And what we're seeing is a representation of what happens within all of us, which is the concrete mind seeks to pave over the rest of the self with its ideas of how life should be. So the concrete mind within each of us dictates how the emotions should behave, how the body should behave, what they should do, and how they should do it. What we find is our emotions turn around and say, well, sod you, I can't be bothered with that. I'm not going to live up to that aspiration, bugger off. And there's an internal conflict or internal war takes place. And most people are living in that place. They're living in the place of the war between the mind and the emotions, where part of them wants chocolate, part of them doesn't. Part of them wants to live in a tidy house. Part of them can't be bothered. Part of them would like their life to be this, that, and the other part can't be bothered doing the things required to make it that way. And that what we are living in the world is a situation that is an exact representation of that. So the paving of the concrete world of the West over the rest of it is simply a mirror image of what's going on within us. And this, again, is about how people can understand how they can really act to change the world. It's not about fretting about these big situations, realizing it's a mirror of what's going on within us. And if we tackle that problem, then actually we are doing our damnedest duty. We're doing better than we could if we attended every protest going, and we can do it from the comfort of our own living room without actually going anywhere. But it's realizing that that's how powerful everybody's role actually is. And this comes back to the point of what you... Yeah?
Sorry?
Go on. No, you carry on.
Don't you think it's also like a cycle, a universal cycle, a Earth cycle, a humanity, a cycle that is...
Yeah. Well, I think it's more to do with...
after a calendar or...
No, I think it's about a process. So, I mean, in some of the experiences I had in my past in terms of my story... I had experiences that showed that, and again, this is just purely from my experience anyway, but that what's happening on the planet is that, so most people's concept of consciousness and what they are as a being and all the rest of it is about animating a form to seek mastery over it. So the process of evolution is derived through the mastery and excellence in a form that we can then be released from. Whereas once mastery is achieved, whereas for a planet it's different, and in planetary evolution they evolve through dreaming forth more complex blueprints out of their own substance. So what happens is there's only one DNA strand on the planet. Everything, that's why we're 98% the same as pigs and 95% the same as trees, because there is only one DNA strand on this planet. We're all made of planetary stuff, molded in different ways. And what's happening is we're going through the process of the known issues associated with the human blueprint. And I think this is where, when I think there are, this concept of starseed or cosmic seeding. There's some incredible writing about it. Like there's an evolutionary biologist called Lyle Watson. He wrote the book Supernature and also a second book, Lifetide, where he's trying to get at what I tried to get at in some of my work, because it's very mysterious. We live in a great mystery. It's a very magical world to live in. And, to try and belittle that mystery is very callous and arrogant. But what he's doing is alluding to the fact that the only place new material on this planet comes to this planet is from space, and it comes from other places. So we have cosmic dust and stardust and meteors and meteorites landing all the time, and every one of them contains new material from elsewhere. In the entire planetary biosphere, which is soul, so it's soul. There's no void on this planet, okay? It's soul, that's S-O-L-E. There's a single planetary entity. There's no void between you and me. There's just lots of air and some structures, but we're all completely enmeshed within the planetary soul in that respect. And I mean that in a singular form, S-O-L-E. So, what's happening is the planetary biosphere absorbs that new material and it learns and it integrates and it interfaces what it's learned. And in the experiences I had, what I saw was that the manifestation and ice age cycles of the planet were like wake and sleep cycles of it dreaming forth more complex forms out of its own substance. So Lyle Watson gets at this in his book Lifetide, where he talks about how after one of the early ice ages, so pre the first ice age, it was simply single-celled organisms. Then out the back of that, we had the movement towards multi-celled organisms, but disorganized within. So you have things like slugs and snails and scorpions and insects where the outside is ordered, but the inside seems to be this disorganized goo substance. It's just disorganized squidge. But then after a later sleep cycle, i.e. ice age, then we had the awakening of organs, which is about organization. So the organs formed where the internal frameworks was able to organize itself. And then we had the birth of the invertebrates, which was even more complex. And then we had the mammals, and each time it was about the planet dreaming forth a much more complex refinement of its own substance based on, seemingly, material and information received from elsewhere, but on a physical level. and more. The physical is merely a representation of what's happening on many levels. But the point being there that in terms of the role of humanity in that respect is about understanding that what we're going through is kind of what the esoteric writers would call harmony through conflict, which is a known issue of the writhings that take place in these fragile forms as cosmic forces move through them, and as we, the indweller, wrestle to kind of mitigate the filtration that we're duty bound to kind of navigate, which is the flush of consciousness, flush of self-awareness, the movement of powerful forces like rage and reactivity and sexual lust and desire and all of these, and we have this delicate form that just writhes and responds to these things and seems to drive us forth into actions that we later feel ashamed of or whatever, and it's just this wrestling for dexterity in each of those areas. My sense is that this is the process, and this is why you can have things like prophecy, or you can have things like foretellings, is because there's like known issues with these blueprints, and the specific thing about the human blueprint is that it is the first form on this planet that we know of anyway that can manifest divine self-awareness. And that in itself carries with it so many burdens. There's so many burdens of self-consciousness associated with that.
Yeah. Before we go to people's public trust, I want to ask you about numbers. I saw that in your Skype name you have the 13. What do you think about 13 already, the number 13?
What do I think about it? I love that number. It's my number. It's a number that just is throughout my life, from birth date to suicide, is to repeating itself all over the place. So yeah, 13 works for me basically. But yeah, people's public trust, that's a bit of a leap from what we were chatting about, isn't it? I kind of missed that there. I got interrupted by somebody chatting to me there. So what was it you were asking me about 13 in relation to other things?
Didn't get that, sorry.
Sorry, I'm just saying that. I got interrupted by somebody just chatting to me there for a moment. So what were you asking? Because I heard you mention people's public trust and then something about 13, but I didn't get the relationship between the two.
No, that was just before we going to people's public trust. The question came. Bob want to ask something. Bob, come on.
Yeah, it was the number 13. I heard you speaking about the bodies and so forth. And our numbers, you answered on 13 minutes past the hour, bang on. And they were 13 on the live stream. We were 130 minutes into the second part of the overrun when you answered. The little samples we have running. And since you've been talking, our numbers have gone up and returned to 13. They've gone up and returned to 13.
Wow.
I was getting a little bit odd. You started speaking of the bodies, 1, 2, and you kind of went 3, touched on it.
There are more, absolutely.
Yeah, well, I'm aware of that. I just kind of thought you may be, and I might mention that synchronicity. Please continue.
Yeah. Well, I think 13 is the magic number for humanity. It's apparently and allegedly, this turns up from numerous authors and also in tradition as well, is that the number 13 for some reason is massively significant for all of us. So, and I don't know why. I do not know why. I don't know that whether that's because that is the number of bodies, or whether that is the number of strings in dimensional string theory, because that's one of the positive numbers. It's also the 12 jurors and the judge. It's also the 12 disciples and the Christ. It turns up throughout the place that 13 is a significant number for us, and I'm not entirely sure why. Some of like an incredible author that I know, V. Van Dam, he writes in a great book called Starcraft, which is about working with nature energies. He writes in there that the ideal working number is 13, but he doesn't suggest as to why. But I know that it's a number that I have strong associations with, but I'm not entirely sure why. So it looks like if it's turning up in this call repeatedly, it's maybe this is the foundation, this is the anchor. The anchor is 13.
That's good. So tell us more about people's public trust. Like when I hear after your speech, you mention people's public trust, I was like, what? He don't talk with like the OPPT people that I investigate for 2 months. And can you tell us more first how that people's public trust is not the same than one people's public trust, and how?
Well, yeah. Okay. The one people's public trust are people who stole my name. I spoke to them over a year ago when they were Public Trust 1776, and they still have that website. But the thing was, because I formed the People's Public Trust beforehand, they were all the website hits around the world for a public trust or People's Trust or whatever. It was my website that comes up first.
That's good.
And the thing is, as well, it's about the power of the spell. And the point was the rationale behind the People's Public Trust, and the whole reason for it was that it was a demonstration of the application of the spelling work that I tried to teach. It was meant to be nothing more than that. So I dipped into the sovereign and freeman movement to basically say, what, you're wrestling with this, that, and the other? Both. Here's the language for that. Here's the language for that. Here's the language for that. It's already there. You don't need to reinvent it. You don't need to wrestle with these concepts. And that was when I became known for doing work with the master title. So, about Mr., Mrs. and Miss, and how really, if you're going to use a title, it should be the title master. It's our constitutional title in this country. I know a lot of people have continued to research beyond that and seem to think it's burdened with all sorts of stuff, but I still don't think it is. I think it's the simplest title to use in relation to enforcing our power in relation to public servants and in state agents. Also, the work in relation to the collar, the cuff, and the tie. So the fact that men have to go to there's places that you and I can't go unless we're collared and cuffed. I think this is a massively significant symbology that is not conspiratorial in any way, because it's naming what's already there and saying, hey, can we just discuss this? Why is it that I have to wear things called a collar and cuffs to come in here? What is going on with that? And why is it that we live in a graded collar system with blue collar and white collar and dog collar? And why are all the police known by their collar number? These are symbols which, if we made them made of metal, it would be very clear. And the People's Public Trust was, so that was about, concepts like that people had struggled to express. The People's Public Trust was about expressing the mechanism for acting upon public servants that were hiding behind limited liability and hiding behind corporate faces, which is by recognising that there is a trust placed in all public servants prior to signing any contract, so prior to inheriting any statutory obligation. There's trust created, and trust legislation underpins the statutory legislation, except in trust there is no limited liability. The people can't hide behind the insurance policy of the company. They're personally liable. And the OPPT did not grasp that whatsoever, but they loved the power of the spell because it resonated with them. It was like, yeah, the People's Public Trust, yeah, blah, 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 because they knew it worked. It's a powerful spell, because it's not about creating something, it's about naming what's already there. The people already have a public trust in their public servants. Most of the issues that they have regarding to corporatism and big pharma and people poisoning their food and telling their wives that they're fat and ugly unless they buy these products, or telling their kids that they're inadequate unless they buy this product or do this action. If we had representatives who did their job and monitored the quality of the merchants that came to work in this country, be they from within or international, if they were doing their job properly and looking after the well-being of the people, which is what the point of the trust is. The trust is that we trust public servants with having the well-being of the community, well-being and safety of the community as being their priority. That's what the trust is. So if public servants are behaving in a way which is contrary to that, then they've failed in their duty. They've absolutely failed. And a lot of the problems, like I mentioned about the big pharma and the banking and the blah, 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 people poisoning food and stuff like that, if the representatives did their job, we wouldn't have to worry about any of that. We wouldn't have to worry about these matters coming in. Yeah.
You said trust, and one of your interview also, you say that trust is very important. I think the people lose trust today, and How do you put these two things together? Because people lose their trust and they don't really trust that they represent us anymore.
Well, exactly, yeah. And so the point then is that there's actually a door to legislation there. You can actually go and take cases for breach of trust. You know, breach of trust is a valid charge, but you do need to have it evidenced. I've said publicly that I would take representative action, which is basically large group action against either elected members or elected officials or police staff or whatever who were guilty of breach of trust, of which there's lots of them, if enough people sign up to back the action. And the fact is, not enough people have signed up. Because for me, if a few thousand people sign, that's not representative. There's 60 million people in this country. How is it a credible argument that somebody is guilty of breach of trust if only 3,000 of us are willing to say something about it? It's like, that is not representative. And it's not actually representative of how people really feel. And for me, it's like people have to be willing to put their feet where their belief is, you know. And it's still not enough of that. There's just not enough, and it then means it's not credible. You know, it just becomes this pocketized kind of movement or faction or cult or whatever it gets called by the mainstream, because it's not accessible enough. And for me, the point of the People's Public Trust is it's mainstream accessible. It uses all the language of the mainstream. It doesn't reinvent anything. There's no legal learning required. There's just a basic introduction. It's totally accessible in that respect. But for me, there wasn't even enough support in the sovereign movement. I mean, don't get me wrong. I had loads of support and thousands of people, but it just is not representative enough. And my problem is that I'm completely useless at organising stuff, and basically to be bombarded with thousands of people to try to coordinate volunteers and structure and blah blah blah, that just sent me into a spiral of despair and growing grey hairs, basically, because the whole point for me was just to give people a tool set. So the point behind People's Public Trust is anybody can use it. You can go and print your own badge, because what I used to do was I used to go into court with a badge and a clipboard saying I'm here from the People's Public Trust pursuing quality and excellence and humanity and in service to the taxpayer, because that's what the public service is for. And it was just about getting people a more humane experience. And I had incredible results in courts, in police stations and things like that, just by being an observer. And it was invoking quantum mechanics. You know, I was just simply introducing the observer effect from a credible observer. Anybody can use that. Print yourself a badge, make it up for yourself. I'd love to create an organisation. It's not my thing. But it is there as a framework. The website's there for people to refer others to. peoplespublictrust.com. It would be nice if there was a bit more money to pay that came into the donation box, so we could pay an administrator to maybe start to manage the throughput of volunteers and things like that, because it'd be really nice to train people, and that's all stuff that could be in the pipeline. But it requires just more of a committed core of people, and it's just a difficult thing to pull together. One of the biggest problems with sovereignty consciousness is that people reserve their right to act on whimsy all the time, whereas what you have in business and in the corporate agenda is people that turn up at 9:15 every day and they leave at 5:15 every day, and they operate under the whip all day long. And you've got the freedom movement, which does stuff when it can be arsed, and it's the curse of sovereignty awakening, which is, you get 200 people coming to a room and they, everyone's having tea break, but we've all got to wait an extra half hour because five out of the whatever are exercising their sovereign right to have a longer pint or to smoke another fag or to have another spliff or whatever. And it's a real difficulty. And this is where people have demonized the concept of contract without realizing that it's actually about to contract. And it's where, well, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to contract my sovereignty for the moment. I'm going to put my sense of humour aside. I'm going to put my sovereign right to smoke and drink aside. I'm going to put my sovereign right to this, that, and the other aside, so that we can actually get something done. And actually, by us all agreeing to contract the fullness of our wholeness, to focus on this one thing, means we might actually get something done. But because the sovereign free man movement have demonized the concept of contract, they refuse to get into proper arrangements with each other. And I've been in I've been in a situation at Boddenham Manor over the last year, which has been incredible. because the private trust between people has been put to the test, because it really is about trust. Everything, all community is founded on trust. And there's what we're talking about in relation to public servants is the public trust. But what we have with each other is private trust. And what's amazing is where private trust between people fails because it's not well enough defined, and people make trust too broad a thing. Whereas really it's like people say, oh yeah, I trust you, he's a good guy. And it's like, yeah, well, you might trust him to go out on a protest with, but would you trust your kids with him? You know, and I don't mean that in a bad sense. I mean that just in the sense of, you know, if you've got two kids that you want to babysit for a couple of hours, would you trust them with that? Would you trust them with, you know, going and doing your shopping for you to pick the right things? So people use the trust too casually. They use it too absolutely. It's like, well, actually, we only trust each other for certain things, and we need to get a measure of that, and we need to get better at clarifying exactly what we're looking for from each other in our either activist frameworks or our social frameworks or whatever, because my experience says that the reason the entire movement is failing, and I think it is because of trust in each other. And the whole conspiracy matrix around Bilderberg and all this sort of stuff, where people are being judged as being MI5 or feds or shills just because they're achieving stuff by people who aren't achieving stuff usually, is just such a sad measure of how low the trust has become. When it's like, well, actually, have you checked that person out? Have you been with them? Have you spent time with them? How can you know whether you can trust them unless you as a human being have spent time? You know, it's such a convoluted thing.
Yeah.
So
what I see is that people basically don't trust people they don't know. That is very, for me, that is very strange. I grew up like in a big community, private school, but this was more a community than when I really went out to in the system, how we can call it. I was very surprised because the people don't trust, and that is feeded so much mistrust. And I always start to trust people before I mistrust, you know. And even I think we are compromised also through the system, through the family, through the school, to all the different stuff that makes like people really mistrust to each other. And that is, I think, that is a fundamental, at least in the first world and in the Western world, that is a big problem. When I travel to also Middle East or Africa, also more simple, the people get more trust they have also to each other.
Exactly. I had a friend just last night talking about when she was in Africa, and on the bus she was saying that nobody spoke. It was just so machinated, but you'd have people jumping on with all these kids, and they just put other people's children on people's knees, and nobody would say anything. The child wouldn't say anything to the person whose knee they were on. The person whose knee they were on wouldn't say anything to them, and the child would just ride on the person's knee and then get off at the stop that they were with and go off with the adult they came on with. But the basic community trust was there. You know, it didn't need to be discussed. Whereas the whole divide and conquer methodology has been executed so well here in the West, that the very stuff we're talking about, the very distrust that we're talking about here, is a testimony to its effectiveness. You know, absolute testimony, and it goes right back to the times of the Spanish Inquisition and the church's belief of or the church's practice of getting everybody to look at the neighbours to see if they're sinning. It began then, sort of thing, if not before, and then we just had a breakdown in community off the back of this ever-increasing distrust and demonization of each other. And you know, it truly is a case of divided we fall in this respect. It really is.
Is division, creating division, is also likely is posting the sport. Sport is one of the most divider promotion. To all my football friends, I say football is the first cause of racism in the world. You have people in each country, even from city to city, they hit on each other because of only football, or the whole creating concurrence. Like is even in the school we have the notes to judge what you did right or not. that is and is very, very largely promoted. So it's like to come back to the trust. I think that is definitely a key point. Yeah.
What I've kind of realised on trust now is that actually it goes back another layer. And the reason people can't trust each other is because they don't actually trust themselves. And they don't trust, because we have let ourselves down so many times in our aspirations or in our goals, that it cultivates a distrust of certain aspects of self that then cannot help but mirrored in the world, where we start to struggle to trust each other for certain things. And especially for the kind of deep and powerful connections that we need to have with each other to move forward as a species. We need to be connecting much more deeply, much more authentically, and much more honestly, at a level of really owning our own crap and really owning where we're at emotionally and mentally. And the kind of the ongoing repetition of information to mask where we're actually at emotionally and mentally, I think is preventing proper authentic connection that I think is deeply needed to deal with some of the issues that we're up against here. It comes back to the spelling, actually. So, before I head off, I'm going to have to head off shortly, but to take us right back to the whole spelling your story thing. When I do a spelling event, I like to get people to think back to times in the playground at school, or at home in the family, or in a relationship where somebody said something that really hurt, something really hurt. And to then look at how that made you physically feel. What happened to your body when somebody said that? You didn't breathe in and expand with warmth and joy. Nobody does to that when something really offends and hurtful happens. It's kind of like we contract and we withdraw and we try and make ourselves smaller because of the impact of this. And if you then ask people to say, well, how do you treat yourself in your head after that? What do you say about yourself? What do you say about other people? And how do you treat them? That is the power of the spell. You can have people who think badly of themselves and treat themselves less than they should for years, decades, as a result of just a few words said on the playground or by mum or dad. And that is crippling. And to see that happen in everybody's life that I know, there's nobody I know that's free of this. There isn't. And I know there's lots of people saying, I'm not affected. It's like, it just means that most people are ignorant to the truth of their emotional depths, I think, in that respect. Because if there was a single human being on this planet that fully stood in the authority of the substance of their divine presence, every one of us would know about it. We would absolutely know about it, because it would be an incredible entity of presence. It really would. Because that's what it is to truly release the shackles of the misspelling of humanity, where we've spelled our own fallibility, we've kind of spelled our own description of our not fitting, or our unworthiness, or the scale of the capacity of our action. We've spelled all this to ourselves as a result of all these other spells that have affected us. All of those accumulated, from those in the home to those in the playground to those in the relationships, they've all cascaded on top of each other to create a position of our frantic efforts to be positive and to give positive affirmation and positive commentary about ourselves, but against a background of a subconscious repetition.
Yeah, I talked 2 weeks ago about trauma-based society, and that is exactly what you said. It is. It comes from little traumas. It's like even I don't know how it is in England, but here or more south, the kids just get spanked all the time. And even here in Switzerland, it's not even forbidden by law that the parents can spank their kids for educational correction, or how they call it. And all these little traumas, I think, it makes a lot to our society. And we are the only one who can break this chain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're the only ones that can undo those spells by refinding a sense of value in where we are, and by undoing all of them, every single one, everyone that impacts us. And that's why that process wasn't built in a day. It took a lifetime to build. It's going to take a time to undo it. And I think there's just not enough respect for the challenges we face with ourselves, respect for the process. People, it's like EFT. People seem to think that you just tap yourself in a couple of places and then it's magically gone. Okay, maybe it is. But I think in reality, there's, and in my experience anyway, that may just help release the momentary tension in a moment. But in terms of real lasting issues of value and worth, I see again just a bit of a rise of a false positive. And this is why I've been kind of quiet over the last year or so, is because I'm deeply seeking to create spaces and events that allow us to be more evocative of our truth, and to be where we're at and how we really feel, so that we can move through it together and develop a strength of expression of our anger and our discontent and our shame and our blame and all these things, so that instead of them working against us, they can work for us. And I really think that until we get a handle on that, we're not going to be able to deal with the global issues, because we can't even deal with our own feeling effectively. And I think there's a right order to this. I think that order is it. I mean, just to tie that into the People's Public Trust again, is like for people who are looking to act, the People's Public Trust is a tool of a spell that people can use to temporarily veil the fact that they're operating by themselves in a way, but they can start to speak from the whole. But it's a doorway to spell a new sense of empowerment for themselves. So they're there saying, well, actually, I'm here as People's Public Trust, but to express my personal feelings of broken trust, my personal feelings of discontentment, my personal feelings of you speaking in an inhumane fashion or treating this other person in an inhumane fashion. And if we can be as human as we actually are about that, I've seen magic happen, because if we come from our human truth, others respond and resonate to it. They really do. And I know there's so many people who scoff at that, but it's generally people who haven't actually tried it, or when they have, it's not really been how they feel. It's been like, a rant or something like that. And it's like, no, that's not how you really feel. Get into how you feel. Get into your sadness. Get into your fear. Get into your vulnerability. And if you speak to people from that place, my goodness, and mountains can move. I've really seen it happen.
Okay, bro. We let you go. I know that you had to travel a little bit far to get any connection. I hope we will bring you back on the radio once, anytime you are ready, or if you wish to pass a word or something. Thank you so much for being on the Dark City tonight. And I hope...
Yeah, go on.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Honestly, it's been a real pleasure. It's been a real pleasure. I wish I could have spent a bit longer with you because I feel like we ended up going quite a bit into some of the esoteric stuff without infilling with a bit more on spelling and whatnot. But I hope folk got stuff of value out of that. And I really think sometimes,
very good. I really love it. It was very good information, and it's good to see the things from a different point. Also like. It's not a talk of dividing again, and that I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, no, absolute pleasure. I think we've got to find a language for this now, don't we? We've got to find a language for inclusion, but still honouring our deep feelings, and honouring the anger and honouring the rest of it. And there is a place. It does all fit together. We just have to find the right perspectives that make that happen. This is possible, but it's about trust. It's about trusting the fact that we're in a process, and as a species and individually, and not to judge it by the temporary snapshots. So what is the true snapshot of the human process? Is it 3,000 people at Bill about doing an or is it the police pinning somebody to the ground? Is it the tear gas in Turkey? What is the true snapshot of humanity? And it's like, well, if we formed a conclusion of each of them individually, we'd be wrong. But if we could actually see the fact that they're all snapshots of something much bigger, then we're in a chance of realizing that we're not the storyteller, we're part of the story. And there's a real liberation in that, to realize, wait a minute, it's not just our story. There's other stories being told here. We're all part of a much larger story, and I think we're on the way to newer times, but I do think we've got a lot of the challenges of honesty ahead, and a real cultivation.
Yeah, I think we lost Darren.
To our communal interactions.
We just lost you for
And yeah,
10 seconds.
That's what we're looking to do in my next event. So if people want to keep pinned to I'll let you know if I'm putting something on. I'm hoping to plan some stuff in the next few months, but it's going to be more of that ilk, which is about, can we evoke the substance of our own presence? Can we actually bring the substance of our authority here without it being so kind of collared and cuffed, and so kind of veiled by frameworks that aren't ours. A powerful dispelling is needed, and I certainly am up for trying to help bring that about in the event in the future. That's for sure. So I'd be well up for coming back on again if you wanted to do a bit more on maybe some spelling work or something else sound related or whatever else. Actually, if anybody listens to this and has any ideas of what they'd like to hear, I'd be quite happy to come on and chat about anything else.
We will do with pleasure another show. Bob, just say you can come on every night if you wish. And but we let you go now. The connection is not very good. I don't know if it's my connection or if it's your connection. I also have a very bad internet. But we're gonna play a song, and we just will continue to discuss some more minutes in a couple of minutes. Bob gonna play a song, but thank you, Darren, if you are still here after, and if not, we're gonna talk very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No one
All right, we are back on air after a very amazing show with Darren and talking about spell of your story, and the one we are the only one who can change it. BJ, Lee, and Bob was supposed to talk, but Darren say so much amazing things that we all went quiet. What do you think, Lee? What did you get some more information tonight?
Yeah, he's just that's the thing about Darren's videos and that. Obviously, I've never seen him in it live. I've only seen recordings of him doing talks and stuff. And you kind of like something he says resonates with you, and you're kind of like, yeah, I'm going to look into that. And it really rings true, and blah blah blah. And then you think, right, I'll check another video out. And he talks, and you learn something more, and it goes a bit deeper and a little bit deeper, but just slowly digging away at the surface for you, so you can slowly start understanding the deeper realms of what we are and what we think, how our brains work. You know, he's a true, incredible philosopher. The guy.
Incredible. Also about the trust, I think that is definitely a big subject. I see also, like in the so-called truth movement, that a lot of people they just mess around with other truth movers, and instead to come together and find out what. I think in that, like Darren said, the whole life is a huge mystery, and we have to go find out what is really what it is really all about. And I think that the only way to get there is to let go the old, and even if we come on certain ideas how it could function, we have to be able to let go again, and to like we say, it's like the onion, huh?
Yeah. Keep peeling away.
Keep peeling away. And if you think you're in the center, you still have a couple of layers to take away. But finally, we come to simple things, and that is also what I see with the kids. They are the pure nature, and if you ask them what is really important, is to have fun. Is not the things that you hear from. Traumatized adults, if you can say. Therefore, I think the whole trust is also about the again, we're coming back to the spelling. Also, when the people I see a lot of people, even if my English is not top, or my French is not top, or even my German, I think I cannot even write correctly in any language, but. For me, it was never a problem. I could talk to anybody, and because I trust the people. And if you have to express something, I think there is definitely the language barrier is one of the first that people don't trust anymore in other people, or he talks strange, or even the Arab language or the Chinese or Japanese, just like is so far away that creates the. As another separation, and that is the whole Babylonian idea of separating and getting control over. If the people are lost, if they lose the trust in themselves, they have no way to trust anybody else, and that is so true. And of course, as we talk a lot, is the system or the society or the neighbors or so on. They are all in that paradigm of not trusting anybody else. And but again, if somebody don't trust anybody else, it's because they don't trust themselves. Yeah, definitely.
Also, is creating competition.
Yeah,
to be competitive also leads you to mistrust each other,
and
they start that at a very early age with the child. You know, through their education system, through the kindergarten, you know, you'd start to lose that trust from a very, very early age. And once it gets impregnated inside you, you can't trust yourself. And And that's when they take total control over you. It's a great deception. It really is.
What do you think, Bob?
Not a lot, really, Jabba. I kind of gave up thinking a while back.
You still focus on the numbers?
No. I've well, it's even got weirder now when you start looking at numerology, the jumps. It's just odd. Well, just looking at that, I think if you focus onto something, then you start to see whatever it is you were looking for, in one way or another. So yeah, I think the focus of attention and where we put his energies, and Darren was bang on with that. I know he looks at it a different way. A technique I worked on a while ago, a self-mastery technique. It involves 4 stages of 3, which is 12, and then a final 13th stage of self-mastery. And he said about the name Master, and it was just like click, 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 click. He was explaining something from another angle. It was almost the same thing. And the thing about specifically the technique I used, anyway, I can't speak of any others, it teaches you to look at it and not do it the way you were taught. Do it your way. See it from your angle, rather from the angle of the master, someone, the teacher, or, even a grandmaster, or a guru, or a god. Look at it from your way. You are part of whatever it is, and you're a vital part of it, and you wouldn't be here otherwise. Every part of it is vital. So often we can, as Lee mentioned, you can get ingrained, and we lose. Oh, excuse me, as oh God, it's JB. JB. Yeah.
BJ.
BJ. God, I never get it right. As BJ said about it be getting ingrained. Again, it's about, I think, comprehending or even understanding, Jabba, or overstanding. It doesn't really matter. Getting a grasp on the facts that these things we have done, which we're not proud of, the things we do feel guilty about and we're ashamed of, that we were coerced into those positions. We were coerced into them. We've really got to forgive ourselves. We really have. If we are going to have a focus of intention that is truly going to bring forth, self-mastery or this utopian society or utopian world, if we are going to do that, if that does exist, and I truly think it's here already, that, at least a world of abundance, I don't think we're short of anything. I don't think we really are. We're often led into
believing,
a situation where we think we've got to have something, and there's something we're lacking in something. Perhaps we are lacking in forgiveness of ourselves. Perhaps we are. I mean, I don't know. I'm not qualified to say that. I mean, I'm not, especially for anyone else. So yeah, I learnt a lot. I learnt a lot from Darren there. Really quick, it triggered a lot in me. I'll admit that. It's been a while since we've had. Well, that was the shotgun, wasn't it? That was like the peppered shotgun effect, wasn't it?
we just all went silent,
I don't think. I mean, as many people know, text is probably one of my weakest points, and I had a little text rant actually, and it was really good, really good stuff.
And like Lee is saying, he's a real philosopher. Yeah. And the real is I think is very important in what I just say, because philosophy also gets hijacked. I know. I say that also to. It's like the music, There is real musicians and there is musicians, and what the definition is for a real musician. That is, so I think first when he do it for himself, and
they said we could not do it.
As soon as he have fun with it, so other people will get.
But we did it.
Will have fun with it.
We created a free radio station to bring the people together and spread an alternative message from the mainstream. They tried to silence us. They tried to hack us. But we carried on. You cannot silence the truth. You cannot enslave freedom. You cannot stop a good idea.
You already not.
You cannot stop
you already nobody with this.
The crew is now bigger and stronger than ever before. We will not be kept off the airwaves. We will continue. This is not our radio. This is your radio. This is Dark City Radio.
Because it's a valid point. I looked into this.
Dark City. This is your Dark City.
Is your Dark City.
This is your Dark City. This is your Dark City.
This is your Dark City Radio.
Dukes all have specific meanings in the realm.
Lee, what did you use and study the Peace Public Trust?
Dark City.
Darren's thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I looked into it like a while back when he first set it up, and I couldn't really understand why it didn't take off, because it is a bit of a perfect solution. And if it's set up as the People's Public Trust, as I see it, or it's there. We've given them the trust. Darren explained that earlier, that it's an entity that we've given to them. And all it takes really is for loosely for somebody to realise that if they're going into the job centre to deal with a public servant, they should be able to take in an entity, a third party, to witness the behaviour of the public servant. Now, that could be a best friend of theirs under the hat wearing the title of a People Public Trust member, and he'll fill out a report. And if the public servant acts outside of office, raises voices, is difficult, unreasonably difficult for no apparent reason, then there is a claim for out of office. But when there's a huge group of people all said, I've signed up to the People's Public Trust that you can use my name to do class suits against one man in, I don't know, let's say Ashton Council because he was rude, we'll do that class, and all those people will do the complaint together as the People's Public Trust. You know, it's not a difficult concept. It's just the people willing to understand it, what it's really about. There's no hierarchy of it at all, really, except for maybe there is a group of people on the website coordinating calls for volunteers and things like that, where people haven't got friends that are clued up. Obviously, a little bit of an education on how you should behave, what questions you should ask, what the public servants are allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. Now, that obviously takes a little bit of diligence on the volunteers' behalf, because they're going to start having to read rules and regulations of somebody else's job. You know, then
like you say, it is like you say, it probably work worldwide. What Darren is talking about in the public trust, I definitely will study it. I didn't make my homework before today, but I definitely will study it. Also, in a way that when I saw one of the videos, he talked about the public trust. He talked about the importance of the trust, and for me, it was like, yeah, but people don't have trust, and I don't trust in governments too. And that is exactly the issue. That is my trauma, to say that why we lose the trust of governments. Instead to expose it, we should show them where the trust should be, and that they also take their own responsibility, that if they want to be a public servant, that they should act under public's trust. As simple as that. It's like also we're going to talk with Danny Shine next week, and for me it's also for myself it changed a lot how I saw how Danny is he called himself spiritual entertainment. And I would say he is a spiritual educator for a policeman or for a public servant, or even for people for even mothers that are going their McDonald's and try to make happy their kids. He just asks them how long it really holds the happiness of the kids when they come out of the McDonald's, and they admit it don't hold very long, you know. So all these kind of things that make people aware, but I see that a lot of people who debunk the system or in the truth movement, they put finger on people because they are public servant and they don't spread the trust they should. But that is exactly the point. We have to separate them from their official activity in a way, and take them as human and talk only in a humankind to them. And that is also like Darren said. And then you, as soon as you're gonna mention them as sheeple, I definitely stopped that too since a while, because it is just put another spell on people, and that is creating exactly against a separation, a difference between something. And it's all about this separation that we are living in, and even create more unconsciously. And as soon as we know it is consciously. So there we really have to. That is the place where we can act and definitely break the chain.
Yes, fully understand the power of the words that we use on a daily basis. Only speak.
Yeah, but again, you know? Like Darren, he say, it is not very important in daily basis what kind of spell we use. That is a kind of communication we have. It is as soon as it get important. So if we come to the law or something, there we have to
be very careful. Yeah.
There we have to be very careful what kind of terms and words and spells we use or not, and. For that, you have to know what kind of what the real meaning of the words are. Like
the person who writes, exactly. He knows the intention of the words. You know, until you speak with him directly, you don't know what context the words are written in. You know, so it's.
But don't you think as well? It's about how you choose to receive that spell that's been cast upon you. You know,
send it back.
Yeah, it's exactly that. If you think about bullying, the basic things you say, kids are the natural thing. When they're young and they're doing, the toddlers are bullying one another or whatever. If something doesn't happen with the reaction of a toddler, what does it do, you know? Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
It gets angrier, it gets more, it feels more inside itself, because the spell that it cast or tried to cast didn't have the response. Exactly the same as if a policeman gives you an order and you laugh at him and just say, come on, mate, you're having a laugh with that one, ain't you?
Yeah.
It's not the response that he's expecting to get from that spell. Exactly the same as if Merlin tried to do a make it rain spell or rain whatever, and he went jabba juba juba dabba in whatever language he does, and a rabbit popped up out of a hat. He'd get frustrated with himself. If that makes sense, do you get what I mean? So it's how we receive the words that are said to us that's the key to it.
Yeah, definitely, it makes sense. I forget. I want to say something.
Yeah. It's like if somebody's shouting at you and you remain calm, it throws them back-footed.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's definitely. It's also. I want to say, if a policeman asks you something, he just asks you a question. And that is like already one of the first things you ask him, if he asks a question or if he give an order, because that the policeman can give you an order, you have to done something wrong. And it's the same like when they always want to get you out of the car, but they just ask you the question if you cannot come out of the car. It's the same thing if you just ask if it is a question or order, and the order you always have to justify it. that is something else. But it goes in the same, in a way that he just asks you a question, try to make something effective, and it is not. It is definitely not, because anybody can you ask questions, and to a question there is a yes or a no, and that is your choice or your way you go with it. But of course, most of the people, they just want to go as soon as possible away from the policeman, or they think they just can have bigger problems, and that is exactly what they play with, and that is exactly what makes that you cannot trust them anymore, and that is also how they exactly know
how to take control over you as well.
Exactly.
But remember that as well, you've got to take into consideration that the police are trained to have a authoritative voice. They go to classes when they're in the training how to use that voice. Why would they bother to train them to use that voice if it wasn't a way of casting the spell in a stronger method? You know, it's all about word magic.
Yeah, it's definitely about word magic, and Darren gave a very good example of that today. And it's also how we apply it in our everyday life, what kind of choices we make, and it's to us to break the traumas and to get awakened of what we are doing, or how we are acting, or what kind of choice we take in our everyday life when it comes to the system or authorities, or even, like he said, the way we don't trust two people is because we don't trust in ourselves, and that is the mirror all the time, responding on something. But what I just want to say about the whole truth movement, I see that almost daily now. It is all about that donation thing. It is like, as soon as you have a donation button on your website, you are control opposition. What kind of shit is that? Can somebody explain me that? Bob? No, he don't want to.
No, I was here. Excuse me, muted microphone. What was that, Jabber, again, please? Excuse me.
About donation. Anytime somebody come up with a donation button on his website because he spent his whole day to debunk and think people start to say that this one is control opposition.
Yeah, because people, I don't know. I've got no idea at all. I didn't want a donate button. I never wanted to have a donate button. I thought if we can do it, we'll do it. Our donate button has done £128 in total in what? I don't know if it's been there 6 months, because we didn't want one. Well, personally, but it's not up to me. You know, it's not my radio, it's our radio, you know, it's your radio. That's the situation. And people said that we should give people the opportunity to be able to donate if that's what they wanted to do. So yeah, we did. That's what we did.
Yeah, but
put it there.
I think,
and then people complained that we had a donate button. The weird thing was, it was the same people that encouraged it that later complained that we had it.
Catch 22.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, if people appreciate something and so on, I think we should. In the school we had, there was different groups come to play in the school, and there was you always had a donation, but not a button. That was not. Just a collection that the people give something, how they appreciate the show or not. And I think only in the music business, if the people would only rely on donation, I think we would have way better music. That is the thing. And I personally, I thought about donation buttons on my website, but for the moment, personally, personally, I think I don't deliver enough content to have a donation button on it. If I would really spend my whole day to instead to copy any quotes from the Facebook to another, but I would write real articles. It's like people who sell books, who sell the music, who sell anything else. But I think the donation button, in a way, it is. If we would come back to donation, I think we would have way better content, music, anything, because you can have it even if you don't have the money. On the other side, I saw when the download of the music came and people could download on Napster and all that, because iTunes and all the Amazon MP3 sales didn't exist. We sold way more CDs because the people could listen to the music, and if they like it, they bought it. So way more people could listen for free to the music, and if they liked, they bought the CD. They came to shows, and that is also what I said in the music business. If you would give free the music to listen to the people, and you only make money when you have a show, maybe the show. You would have to pay more entry, because that would be the only money that the musician could relate to. But at least it would be the equal work of the musician, of a band, to make a living out of music. And therefore, I think all the critique about donation, I personally don't really get it. First of all, and to say that if somebody have a donation button on their website or radio or of course, if you ask and say, oh, the radio will stop if we don't have the donation, or the website, or my work will stop, then it's not a donation anymore. Then it's like another hijacked idea of giving money or making money. And maybe we should make a money bomb on Dark City.
We'll have a donation car. People don't.
My only doubt there, Jabba, my only cringe when you were talking was when you said it was about appreciation. So I can only conclude that Dark City is the most unappreciated station on the internet. Joking aside, though, man, I mean, I don't see it. We either do it or we don't do it. It doesn't make any money. It loses money every month. So yeah. But what else would we do? What else would we do?
Yes, somebody asked me, so do you have shows? I say, no, I stopped music 2 years ago. And he say, so you live on your economies? And I say, no, I lose less money than when I did music. That don't mean I have more money, but I paid more than 10 years, almost 15 years. I paid more than what I get out of my music. That was because we did it. So we want to do it, and that was our own choice. But definitely making music if you are not professional and you have the whole industry behind you. You pay more for making music than what you get. The musicians, of course, they never talk about this kind of issue, because they could lose some promotion. And it's like the same that a lot of musicians on Don's show last time, also with the DJ, who talk about the music industry and stuff. And a lot of musicians know that, but they will never talk out because they think it could disturb their career. Okay, we are in the end, or at the end of the BDcoded after show with Darren. Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, BJ. And next week, Danny Shine. Looking forward for that. And Shen Ross, we're gonna do as soon as we find a slot to put him on. This will be a great show. I'm looking forward for that too. Be decoded on Dark City. Thanks for listening. See you soon.